Hello, my name is Tylluan. I'm a solitary pagan witch. I'm an author, and I founded the Wolf and Howl Press. And today's little talk is going to be about witch bottles, because it was something somebody mentioned in a comment here back last year, and it's taken me all this time, I'm afraid, to get round to it. But here we are, witch bottles. Witch bottles and witch ladders, for that matter, they are rather controversial because it's difficult to prove either way how they were used. We know that people did use magic and spells going back hundreds of years, even when they were not supposed to, even when there were very severe penalties for anyone who did. Yet they persisted. And we know this because little things turn up from time to time. You know, old farmhouses might demolish their chimney and discover, you know, a doll dressed up and stuck with pins and little notes attached to it saying what horrible things they would like to have happen to the person it represented. So these things are there in the past. How widely they were used, well, we don't know, because sometimes people would use things that were perishable, things like onions. You know, it was quite possible to do a spell where the onion represented the heart of the person you wanted to attack. And they would put pins and nails and things in that, you know. Well, of course, an onion, oh, get that right. Talking rubbish today, honestly. An onion is perishable, and unless it happens to be in very unusual circumstances, it will just rot away. And all you're going to find is a heap of pins and maybe a little bit of shriveled organic matter, and nobody knows what it is. Witch bottles, however, are a little bit different. Witch bottles were filled with things like pins and urine and bits of paper and all sorts of things. Anything nasty could go in the bottle. They were often done in what is called a bellarmine. Now, a bellarmine bottle is a bottle, I think it was named after an Italian cardinal or something, but it's a very old bottle. It's bulbous on the bottom. It has quite a long top, and on the front of it, it has this image of a face, usually a man. They were often done in that, and the stopper put in, and then the bottle was hidden away, and the curse could do its job. Or whatever the magic was. I mean, they assume it's a curse. There is a tendency whenever people find magic to assume it must have been bad magic, but it wasn't necessarily. I mean, think about it. You know, bad magic isn't really that common. Not always, anyway. So that was one type. And there is a school of thought that says witch bottles really didn't start up again until, late 80s, something like that. And then people became more interested in paganism, the occult, folklore, and they started copying things they'd heard about, and they started doing it for themselves. And then there are no witch bottles going back further, so they say. But actually, I have personal knowledge of a witch bottle because we found two in our hedge years ago. And they'd obviously been filled with something. They were black inside, and the black stuff was, what do you call it? It was like in flakes, where it must have dried out. So it had obviously been there a long time. And they were tied into a hedge. We found two of them. There may have been a third. Somebody thought there might have been one on each corner, but we're not sure about that. There were no pins in it. But the interesting thing was that the rope that had tied it in the hedge had actually become embedded in the growing stalk of the hedge, so that the bark actually came out over the rope, and we could tell that the rope was not something that had been made all that recently. Now, I'm not saying it was 100 years old. It might have been 80 years old. I'm not saying it was 100. I really don't know. But what I find interesting is that there is some evidence that bottles were used for some hidden purpose. And we have to be careful what we say. See, it's nice to jump to the conclusion and say, this was a witch bottle. Well, we don't know. We don't know whether it was. We don't know what purpose there was for it being there. I mean, if you think of tying something into a hedge on four corners, you think, well, it's either to keep something out or to keep something in. Think about it. To keep something out or to keep something in, if it's done that way. And in fact, I often say about magic is basically please and thank you. Please will you make something happen, or thank you for making it happen. That's what spells and ritual usually are. They're one of the other. And in the same way, I think with witch bottles, there is this tendency to put it to one side and say, oh, no, it couldn't have been. I think it was. I think the way they were positioned, I think the fact they were tied, they were hidden. They were not meant to be found. We only found them because we really had to cut the hedge back. It was a bit of a mess. And just found them that way, sheer fluke. They were not meant to be found. Oh, here we go again. Do you know, we've had this all morning. They can hear something they don't like. I don't know what it is. So, yes, I think there is this tendency to, on the one hand, to overreact and to think it's something a lot more important and significant than it is. We don't know, as I said, that it was a witch who did it. We don't know why they did it. I think it was an occult purpose because of other things that were present at the time. But that's just my view. And the same really for witch ladders. Now, I might do another little talk on witch ladders specifically, but this is another one where what we know doesn't entirely tie up with what we're being told. And it's very easy to jump to conclusions. And of course, because of the burgeoning interest in witchcraft and the occult, paganism, folklore, from about the 1970s onwards, there is a tendency that people were doing things in that period which have now become set in stone, and we're being told, oh yes, well they were being done in the 1970s, therefore they must have been done in the 1870s, and therefore they must have been done in 1570. Actually, no, it doesn't work that way. However, sometimes we do find evidence that there were things going on that don't quite make sense unless we assume there was some line of information that was carried along. But witch bottles are not really one of them. We know sometimes they were used for spells, definitely. And we know sometimes now they are. And from my hedge, I know they were being used much, much earlier than we're told the revival of witch bottles dates from. So somebody knew something about it. If we use them, I think now, as a modern witch, I always think, bear in mind, the please and thank you, the keep something in, keep something out. If you're going to do it, what you have to remember is you're working with something very solid, immutable. The bottle itself is unlikely to be destroyed, unless it gets accidentally broken. That's why they were often buried or bricked up and things like, or tied in a hedge to keep the bottle safe. So whatever you're doing is intended to be solid, is intended to be unchangeable. So please, if you're going to do it, make sure you've got your intention absolutely clear. Are you going to keep something in? Keep something out. Are you going to make something happen? Prevent it from happening. Are you saying please? Are you saying thank you? Get it absolutely clear in your mind. Don't think to yourself that because somebody says you have to put pins in the bottle, or urine in the bottle, or chamber lye, or earwax, or menstrual blood, don't think that you have to do it. If you don't feel comfortable doing it, or you don't feel it's relevant to your spell, to your intention, then please don't do it. Do something else. It's better to put your spell on a piece of paper and twist it up somewhere and put it where it's going to be safe. Put it in a little plastic bag and bury the damn thing if you have to. It's better to do that than to find yourself tied to some tradition that you don't fully understand. So what I'm really saying, and taking a long time to do it, for which I apologise, what I'm really saying is if you fancy having a go at this sort of thing, read up on it. But don't just settle for things that have been written in the last 40 years. Try and get back a bit further. Try and find out, like from museums, things like that, what exactly was being done. And then use your head, use your sense and your thought, and think to yourself, well, what does this mean? Because what you have to remember is the people, the curators of museums, archaeologists for that matter, are very rarely pagan themselves. They come to it and they say what they think happened without actually understanding what your average witch or wise woman or whoever it was, cunning man, might actually have been doing. So that's also very important. And I always welcome comments on my videos, so if there's any questions you want to ask, please feel free. Put a little note in the comments, and I do check them regularly. Okay? But thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you found it interesting. Goodbye.